Hey, I have a question for you. Do you feel like a champion on a regular basis? Like when you wake up in the morning, do you look in the mirror and say, man, there goes a champion? And the theme song from Rocky starts going off in your head. Do you feel like a champion? If so, how are you showing up as a champion on a daily basis? What are you doing in your daily life that says, I'm a champion? Do you think like a champion? Do you feel like a champion? Do you walk and talk like a champion? And are you showing up like a champion, not just for yourself, but for other people? Well, in this episode of the Pep Talk podcast, we're talking with Coach Danny Stone of Champion U, and he's going to challenge you to recognize the champion inside of yourself and to live it out loud. Y'all, this is the Pep Talk podcast. I'm your host, Coach Jay, and my next question is simple. Have you had your dose of pep today? No? Don't worry. I've got you. Let's go. Welcome to episode 9 of the Pep Talk podcast. I'm your host, Coach Jay, a life coach in DFW, and it is an honor and a privilege to be here with you all every week, every Monday, starting your week off with pep. You know, the mission of our podcast is to cheer you on and to coach you up, and that's what we're about. We're about motivation and encouragement. We're about inspiration and elevation, and we believe in cheering you on and coaching you up, because everybody needs a cheerleader to encourage them and believe in them, but everybody also needs a coach. And so what we're doing with this podcast is we're trying to fill both of those roles for you. So if you're new to the podcast, hey, welcome. You are officially deputized as a member of the Pep Squad, and I'm so glad to have you here. And you may be saying, what is a Pep Squad? I'm glad you asked. The Pep Squad are the people who are rocking with the podcast, who see it also as a part of their own mission. They've adopted the mission to cheer people on and to coach them up, to provide that encouragement, that sunshine, that pep that people need to get through their day. You never know what somebody's going through. And so it is my hope that by coming on every Monday and with the content that I post during the week on our various socials, that people would see this and they would be encouraged, that they would be motivated to keep pushing harder, to keep running faster, just to not give up. And even if they have fallen into a place, and even if you have fallen into a place where you want to give up, my hope, my prayer is that through listening to this podcast, you can find something within yourself to say, hey, let's get up, let's get moving. We got dreams to accomplish. We are dream accomplishers. We're dream chasers. We are goal grabbers. That's what we do. That's what we do. All right, so that's what this podcast series is all about. Now, today's podcast, if you listen to last week, let me back up. If you listen to last week's podcast when I had the wheelchair nomad Fletcher Cleaves on, and you're like, man, the motivational treasure, the value can't get any greater. Y'all, we're bringing flames. We're bringing flames for you this week as well, because as I mentioned in the intro, today we have Coach Danny Stone of Champion U. He is a motivational speaker. He is a coach. He is a podcaster, and he's someone that I greatly admire. And when you listen to his story and you hear everything that we're going to talk about over the course of this interview, I believe that you're going to become a big fan of his as well. This interview is absolute fire. It is flame. It is heat. It is nitro fuel. It is all of those things. But I'm bringing it to you. I wanted to speak with him specifically because there are people out there who are listening, and maybe it's even you, or who are watching via the YouTube channel, who you look at yourself in the mirror and you don't believe that there is a champion living inside of you. And you couldn't be more wrong. And so I couldn't think of anyone better suited to speak to that aspect of you than Coach Stone. So I need you to grab something to write with. I need you, if you're watching on YouTube, to prepare your phone, to take your notes, all of these things, because he's going to drop a lot of wisdom on you that I believe is going to be a great help to you. So listen up, pause it, write, rewind, all the things, right? All the things, because it's going to be good. Also, please remember, if you're deriving value from the podcast, grab uh leave a rating, leave a review. That's how this podcast is spread out to more people and made available to more people via suggestions and recommendations. And also, I would love it if you would just share this episode with one other person in your circle of influence so that the mission and the message can continue spreading to more and more people. Y'all, I love you. And I'll be back after the interview to wrap things up. But yo, get ready, get ready, get ready. Like TD Jake says, get ready, get ready. I can't even do it. Get ready, because it's about to be good. And when we get back, you're going to hear this interview with Coach Stone and Coach Jay. Y'all, it's going to be great. It's the Pep Talk Podcast. I'll see you after the interview's over. And here we go. What's up, Pep Squad? I am so excited about the conversation that we are having today. It's with a brother who is just so motivational and inspirational. If you can walk away from this conversation and not just feel that burning desire to get up and to access your inner champion, then I don't know what to tell you. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Coach Danny Stone. Coach Stone, why don't you greet the people? We're so glad to have you on the Pep Talk podcast today.
Oh, man, thank you so much for having me here, Justin. I really appreciate it. What's going on, everybody? I am Danny Stone, also known as Coach Stone, is in the building, and I'm super excited to be here to have this conversation.
All right, Coach. So I have been kind of in your orbit for a couple of years with Champion U and everything. Here's where I want to start with the discussion. I'm a big fan, I'm a big believer of origin stories and the hero's journey. I read comic books, man, so I love the story of how the hero finally accesses who they are. Like when Superman figures out, oh, snap, I have powers, like I can do all this different stuff. What is the origin story of Coach Stone?
Oh, man, it's been a journey of me really trying to discover who I am and my place in the world, and I'm still trying to figure it out. But I can tell you kind of where it started. And, I grew up in low-income housing, surrounded by a lot of drugs and crime, and lost a lot of friends to gun violence. And I was kind of headed down that path. I grew up a real kind of shy and timid kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I was never like a real street guy, but, hanging out with the wrong influence and so on, I started down that path. And for me, I had mentors in my life, and I always had my grandmother was this person. Many of us probably have grandparents like that. They always say something to you and never tell you what it means. They'll just give you a little saying and walk off. My grandmother was full of those. She passed many years ago, but she left me so many lessons. And she always used to say, "You're strong enough to walk your own path, and show me who you are. Show me your friends, and I'll tell you who you are." And I would always ask, what does that mean? And she would just say, "You'll figure it out one day." And she was right. I was 18 years old. I was headed down the wrong path, had gotten arrested a few times for doing stupid things. And I remember it was summertime, and I'm sitting outside in the parking lot of this building with some of my friends, quote unquote friends, and they're drinking and we're doing all these things. And it was almost like my grandmother's voice was in the back of my head. "You're strong enough to walk your own path. Show me your friends, and I'll tell you who you are." And at that time, I knew that I had to say something that was probably going to change my life forever. And I mustered up enough courage to say to the guys, "Hey, fellas, I think I'm going to go away to university and play basketball." Because up until that point, I had been getting letters from coaches to come play basketball, but I was focused on street stuff.
Nice.
They all stopped and they looked at me and they said, what'd you say? And I said, "Hey, fellas, I think I'm going to go away to university and rep the hood." And everybody stopped. There was about 6 or 7 of them. They looked at me. They all started laughing and just clowning me and calling me a bunch of names. "Going to school, man. We're over here making money. What are you talking about? Blah, blah, blah." So I try to, I try to muster my way through saying some other things. They all stood up. I got ready to stand up. They said, nah, you stay over there. We're over here making money. You go to school. And they laughed at me. And it was in that moment, tears started running down my face. But it wasn't even tears of sadness. It was almost like I realized what my grandmother was trying to say. You're hanging out with these people. You're going down that path. You are those people. You're not different. And you're going to end up like them in jail or dead, which so many of my friends were at that time. And so it was awakening for me, That summer, they all laughed at me, clowned me because I wanted to go to university. And I ended up going to university, playing basketball and, doing okay. And, fast forward like 18 years later, I get a message on Facebook from one of the main guys that laughed at me. The other main guy is dead, by the way. And he said, look, man, I just got out of jail. I'm trying to stay out this time. I see all the motivational stuff you're doing. You were right. I was wrong all those years ago, man. I just appreciate it if we could just keep in touch and, you could just, give me some advice to keep me out this time. And that was about 7 years ago, and we still talk to this day, and he's never gone back. So that's just a synopsis of kind of me awakening, trying to find who I am.
That's crazy. So what was your what were you thinking when that message came through from your old homie? Like, what was going through your heart and through your mind right now? Because I know there had to be just a lot of reflection and all this other kind of stuff going.
I looked at the message and I thought, should I answer this, right? I mean, so much time, 17, 18 years had passed, but I thought, why would I talk to this person, right?
Yeah.
We're on completely different paths. We're not like each other. I had those feelings come up again of you guys laughing at me and bullying me for a whole summer because I wanted to get an education. But something just told me, you know what, like, we're past that. The fact that he even reached out to me was like, I mean, you're talking about a real street dude that just did 7 or 8 years in jail. So he reached out to me. I said, I have to answer. And so all these emotions were going through me at the same time. And I just answered the message on Facebook, and we ended up having a really great conversation. And he opened up about a lot of things from his childhood that I didn't know. And he said, I always knew that you were going to be something. Like I knew it. And, that was 7 years ago, and we still have conversations to this day. So
that's awesome. So you had friends with the quotation marks back then who had their own belief systems, and yours were shifting. So I talk a lot about limiting beliefs on the podcast, and as a coach, we all deal with them. They can be absolute bears to overcome. Leaving what you had known to go to university and play basketball, and even now to, because you're like an international motivating speaker, you coach people on how to build their brands through speaking. What have been some of the biggest limiting beliefs that you have had to overcome? And kind of what was your process for first identifying them? Because we have to identify them. But then what was your plan for attacking and ultimately finding ways to overcome them?
Yeah, I think for me, I had some limiting beliefs around where I grew up. I never wanted anyone to know that I grew up in that environment, that I was headed down the wrong path. I was really ashamed of, I got arrested as a juvenile. I didn't want people to know that. And then, going to university and being a university dropout, that was something that those two things I really didn't want people to know. And somehow I stumbled in the corporate world without a university degree. And I ended up doing training and development. And it was always like this secret, like if they find out, I never lied on my resume. I always showed them like I didn't complete my university. And
yeah,
it was always this stigma and thing because I was working with people who had master's degrees and all these things. So it was this real thing like, am I a fraud? Do I deserve to be here? Do I even know what I'm doing in this environment? And growing up in low income housing, the goal for many people's parents just want you to get a quote unquote good job. Like that's the whole dream. And so once I achieved this dream, I felt like a fraud, but then the dream wasn't even my dream because I realized I didn't even really want this corporate job. It was just something that was planted in my head. So I always felt like I just didn't belong in all environments that I was in. I never thought that I belonged in low income housing. I never thought that I was a street guy. I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I never
Mm.
thought that university was my thing. I never thought that I should have been in the corporate world. So there was always this limiting belief and this lingering thing like, why am I here? Like, and so I had to identify where all of those limiting beliefs were coming from. And usually you can trace it back to your childhood, right? So
Right.
I trace it back to my childhood, growing up with a single mom. My dad wasn't around. You know, I kind of traced it back to like my father didn't want me. I would sit on the step and wait for him when he was a kid and he just wouldn't show up. And I think that's where it stemmed from for me. But it took me like a long time to kind of trace it all the way back there.
Yeah. And I think you said something there that I think will speak to a lot of people about how you felt like the spaces that you were in, you didn't belong there.
That's right.
Um, I can relate to that. I mean, even as an adult, sometimes I find myself in spaces and I feel so uncomfortable. Like, how in the world did I get here? Like, I don't belong here. I don't want to be here. What do you think it takes for a person to become comfortable enough in who they are to remove that stigma that we place on ourselves that we don't belong? Because really, you said it. You never lied on your resume. You were doing this training and development, and nobody really looked at you any differently. Like, you know, Danny Stone shouldn't be here, but it was the voice on the inside of you. So, like, for that person out there right now who is like nodding their heads, like, man, I've never felt like I've belonged anywhere. What would you tell them, or how would you speak to that if you were talking to them right now? How would you speak to that to kind of help them begin to change their mindset about that fact?
First thing I would help you to do is to identify whose voice that is.
Hmm.
It's not your voice. It's a parent, it's a teacher, it's somebody in your past who told you that you weren't good enough. And it takes you, it's a long time to kind of figure that out. But somebody along the way told you you weren't good enough, you weren't smart enough, you were stupid, they didn't believe in you, they may have abused you, whatever that is. And so that voice plays in your head like it's yours, but it's not.
Right.
So for me, really identifying whose voice that was really helpful. And so that's what I would tell anyone right now. Like if you have these limiting beliefs, if you don't feel empowered, you don't feel worthy, you got to go back and trace it back to where does that come from? When did you first feel like that?
Hmm.
What was the situation? Who said what to you? And usually that's where you trace it back to. So then once you identify that part, it's like, oh, yeah, now you have to remind yourself of who you are, of the greatness that you have. And so sometimes I get people to sit down and to just make a list of all of the amazing qualities they have. What do other people say that you do well? Why do people come to you for? What are people saying your praises for? And you make a list. Most people have never done that. We're
Hmm.
so focused on the things that we don't do, but make a list of all of the things that you've done that people have said, oh, Justin, you are really amazing. Thank you so much for helping me with that. And once you start to do that and you read that regularly, it's like you start to remind yourself, wait a minute, I've done some things in my life. I've helped some people, right? And even looking at your journey, what are some things that you've overcome that you never thought you could?
Yeah.
Because when you're stuck, you can only see things from a stuck perspective, but you've overcome things in the past. And so I think we have to remind ourselves like of the greatness that we have, the challenges we've overcome, even the things that you've achieved that you never thought you could achieve. I
Hmm.
never thought I would land a corporate job. I never thought I would write a book. So I have to remind myself in those moments where I don't feel like I belong in certain spaces or I'm not worthy that, wait a minute, I've done some things, I've overcome some things. And if I did it before, I can do it again.
Yeah.
And so, one thing I want to tell you, Justin, is you touched on it. Like sometimes we don't feel like we deserve to be in some space. And the reason why I say Coach Stone is in the building is because I never used to believe that I deserved to be there.
Come on.
And it's all the work that I've done over the last 10 years. So when I walk into a building, I know I deserve to be there. I don't care who's in the room. It's not a competition. I'm here because I deserve to be here. I'm bringing energy, attention, and stories and other things that no one else is bringing. That's why I say Coach Stone is in the building, to remind myself that I deserve to be here. And it's a reminder to other people, you deserve to be in any space that you're in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a self-affirmation. I love that. I may have to steal it. I'll send you some copyright coins. But that's so true. Like, as you were speaking, I was thinking about, so I was adopted. Um, and I grew up with kind of a mindset where I felt rejected from my biological parents without, and this was before knowing what the circumstances around it were. And that was something that I carried with me into adulthood. You know, if I didn't get a job, or if somebody said no to a service I was offering, that rejection, like, I would feel it intimately and personally. And
Mhm.
so for that reason, I had a hard time believing, that Coach Jay was in the building, right? Uh, because I felt that rejection so deeply. And I really I had to do some work to discover why rejection hit me so hard, or why a no felt like a rejection, even though a no is not always a rejection. Or there are different types of things that are happening in any situation. So you're right, we have work that we have to do on ourselves, and we sometimes it's frightening. But I think the thing that we have to remember is our present and our future are hinging on the perspectives that we choose to view our past through.
That's so good, brother. Say that again. That's so good.
Yeah, I mean, again, our present and our future, they depend on the lens that we view our past through. And so sometimes being stuck in our past is not our choice, but I think at a certain point it does become a choice. Um, and like you said, you know, being stuck, man, gosh, just it's a horrible place to be when you can look around and see everybody else moving, but it's like you're just like the cartoons, you're running as fast as you can, but you're staying like stuck in that exact same place, man.
And I think what's you said a whole bunch of amazing things there, man. I think what we have to understand is our journey is different than other people.
Yeah.
When I look at Tony Robbins or Les Brown or Lisa Nichols, and I'm like, or Eric the hip hop preacher, I'm like, yeah, I want to be on that level. Why aren't I bigger? Why aren't I reaching more people? And I realized that my journey's different. You know, my time is here. I'm building what I need to build, and when the opportunity comes to have a bigger platform, I'll be ready. And we have to stop comparing ourselves to other people, right? I'm not trying to compare myself to anyone else other than who I was yesterday or last year or the year before. And that's very difficult to do.
Hmm.
But what did you do to kind of break through that? Like, what did you do to kind of realize what was holding you back? What is some of the work that you did?
I think for me, because I'm relatively new into the coaching space, uh, but a few years ago, probably about 5 years ago, I had a podcast. I started a podcast. I'd always wanted to start a podcast, and so I started a podcast called the Ycast. And the purpose of that podcast was just to have conversations with people about what their why is and how they're using it to leverage, you know, what they're doing in their communities, the work, the positive things that they're doing in their lives. How are they using their why to leverage that? And over the course of those conversations, it really got me to thinking. And so that led to me writing a book called Slaying the Lion, Hunt What Is Hunting You. And so in that book, what I talk about is how God has given us the power to overcome every obstacle, but we don't often embrace that power. We think that it's something that we have to reach for when it's actually implanted within each and every one of us. This opportunity, this power to overcome. And so I really took that to heart. Like, I took it to heart, and I really had to begin to understand that just because someone says, yo, Jay, no, I'm not interested in your coaching service, they're not saying, Jay, you're trash. They're saying they're not rejecting me personally. They're just saying no in this season to what I'm offering them. And even then, as I got more clarity about the situation and circumstances around my adoption, I understood that my biological parents, they weren't rejecting me.
Mm,
And a matter of fact, to shift my perspective, it wasn't even about my biological parents putting me up for adoption. Sorry, it was about my adoptive parents seeing something in me and saying, "Hey, this kid is special. Let's
mm.
bring him into our family." And so it's almost like flipping a switch from thinking that I've been rejected to accepting somebody saw something special within me. So maybe I need to see something special within myself.
Man, that's so good. It's really about perspective, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe your biological parents saw something special in you that they didn't think that they could provide,
Yeah.
and so they decided that somebody else would provide that opportunity for you to help you spread your wings. Whatever it is, it really is about perspective, and you touched on it, faith, man. I'm so big on faith. I've had to tap into my faith so much over my life, and I think sometimes when you feel like you don't have the ability or the tools or the resources, there's a couple of things. One, call on your faith,
Mm-hmm.
call on your higher power, call on your creator. If you believe that, if you don't, that's okay. The second thing is to ask for help. Then, if you don't believe in that and you can't call on that, or maybe there's times that you just need help, you can't figure it out on your own. This is an opportunity for you to reach out for help. And we have to put our pride aside. I am a very prideful person sometimes, and I don't like to ask for help. But there's times that I need it,
Yeah,
and I have to just admit that I need some help. And asking for help is actually strength.
it
It's
is.
not a weakness. A lot of people get that wrong. Reaching out and being vulnerable and asking for help is actually a sign of strength. And so I had to shift my whole perspective because you have to understand the environment I grew up in. I grew up around a lot of drug men and a lot of, criminals. So you had to be hard. You couldn't show
Mm-hmm.
any emotion. So for me, it was ingrained in me at a young age that being emotional was soft and people would take advantage of that.
Right.
So I had to shift my whole mindset around asking for help, being vulnerable. And it took me many, many years to understand this. A lot of self work, a lot of calling on my faith, a lot of mentorship, a lot of these things the tools that I had to develop. It doesn't come overnight.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't come overnight.
Yeah, that's all true. And so you started this community, Champion You. Talk to us about, but first I'm gonna say this about it. I came across Champion You on Clubhouse, and sitting in on those conversations were some of the best times that I had on Clubhouse. Just the vibe and the support, and just the welcoming nature of it. And you all lead from out front by saying there is a champion in each and every one of you. Where did that come from, and how did the idea for you to really take that belief and flesh out a community around it? Where did all of that come from?
It just came from all of the work that I've been doing on myself and all the coaching I've been doing over the last 12 years. And so what happened was I when I reached my sort of endpoint in working in the corporate world, I was just sitting around and I realized that I wasn't happy, and I was having these complaining and pity parties with other coworkers. We'd always be complaining. And one day I just said to myself, what am I going to do to change my situation?
Hmm.
I just said that. And as soon as I said that, I went to what everybody goes to. Well, there's nothing I can do. I have to pay my mortgage. I got to do all these things. Then I kept asking myself, what am I going to do to change my situation? Which led me to writing my first book in 2014, You Have the Keys, Now Drive. I also started my own consulting firm while I was working in the corporate job at the same time. So asking myself that question over and over and over again. At first I went to what I can't do, then I went to what I can do.
Hmm.
And I was also reminded that I had been a career coach many, many years before. And I'd done a lot of life coaching and career coaching and business coaching. And it was like I was giving people all of this information and this tools and resources, but I wasn't utilizing them myself.
Okay.
And so that's what led me to writing the book. I started thinking about my journey, how I ended up in the corporate world as a university dropout, heading down the wrong path. I started thinking about all of the people I had coached up until that point. And I said, well, what did we all do to break through these limiting beliefs? And what did we all do to kind of tap into something within ourselves, more potential? And that's when I started to kind of understand that we all have a champion inside of us, right? Champions have off seasons, they have off games, they have downtimes. Champions don't always win. They have to figure out ways to bounce back. They connect with coaches and mentors who pull the best out of them. So I started seeing this thing like with myself. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not a loser. I'm a champion. I started seeing it and identifying it in other people. And then that led me down this path to saying, you know what? We all have a champion inside of us. We've overcome things that we never thought. We've achieved things we never thought. We survived 100% of every bad day. That's what champions do.
Yeah.
And so I started to develop this thing in 2014 and kind of started to flush it out. But it was really the pandemic that made it really kind of come real. I started going live on Facebook and Instagram every single day during the pandemic, just tapping in with people. How you feeling? What's going on? I'm feeling the same way. Here's a resource that I found. I did that every day for 4 months, every single day. And then that champion thing started to get reignited. So I started kind of going through this framework and going through my book and teaching people concepts through the book. And they were like really loving it. They were like, Coach Stone, this is what I need. And then that's how the whole champion you thing really took shape. I'm here to help you unlock the champion within you, right? Championing you to find that inner champion, to live your potential, to unlock things that you didn't know. So I started going live on Clubhouse. I created a space, and then all of a sudden, people from all over the world started tapping in, saying, "Man, these conversations are amazing." And I did that for like 3 years, at least twice a week. And I started my podcast, the Grind and Gratitude Show, around the same time. So people were getting the podcast, they were getting, the Clubhouse, and I was doing that for 3 years, and I'm still doing it.
It's just it's cool, like that. That's the best. That's the best thing that I can. That's the best way that I can say it, because you are championing people to find the champion in themselves. That's noble work. It is. It's noble work. And so you are podcasting and clubhousing. When did the speaking portion become such a big part of what you're doing?
Well, whatever you believe in, God, the universe, whatever, it plants seeds for you. And most of us, we don't see those seeds, right? We ask for more, but we're not ready to accept it when it comes because it doesn't look the way we expect it to look.
Oh, you just said a whole bunch right there.
Right?
Can you unpack that piece for us, please? And then you can just keep on going. But just, yeah, you can't drop a bomb like that and then just keep on moving.
So there's this thing that I call this acronym called ABAR, raise a bar, right? We have to raise our level of what we're asking for. B is for believing that we might be able to get it. A is taking action towards making it happen. And R is receiving it. So raise your level of asking, believing, action, receiving. Now, sometimes we don't know what we want. We stumble, we're not clear. Every once in a while, we get a moment of clarity where we know that we want something else. So sometimes that comes, right? Then we kind of believe that maybe it's possible, but then we fall off track. We take a little bit of action. The biggest challenge I see with people is the receiving part. You ask for something, you might even put in some work to get it. It doesn't come packaged the way that you expect, so you miss it.
Yeah.
I want to, I need $50,000 to get out of debt. and then you get a job that pays you $50,000 more, but it still doesn't look like the what you asked for came, because it didn't come with $50,000 cash in your pocket.
Ooh, come on.
So we miss it. We miss the blessing, the opportunity, because of the packaging. You want it to be the way you want, but maybe God or the universe or whoever else has it packaged up differently for you, because that's the way you need to receive it. So we miss it. We miss it. We miss it. And so I've helped people to identify, that was a missed opportunity there, but it's coming around again and again. And then I've seen that in myself. And so for me, speaking was always kind of around. I started as a youth outreach worker, and I would work with teenagers to do sports programs and all that with the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA. So it was an aspect of my job, because I had to speak to 50, 60, 80 teens, but it was just more like a sports thing. I'm a sports guy, so it wasn't really speaking to me.
Yeah.
And then one day, one of my friends, he was doing these youth programs where he was teaching life skills, communication, how to do your resume, eye contact, body language, all these different things, right? And he was leaving the job. And he said, man, you should take over for me. I said, absolutely not. I'm not a speaker. That's not my thing. And he's like, man, just come. He goes, okay, just come and watch me do my thing. And, just listen. So there's about 30 kids in the room. I'm sitting at the back. He's talking. And then he says, what do you think, Danny? And I was like, what do you mean? I froze, right? I'm not a speaker. And he said, well, tell them what you think. And I got up and I just told a story about a challenge I had to overcome, at 16 or 17. And they all kind of like looked and they reacted. After I gave that speech, 3 of them came up to me. 2 of them were crying, said, man, what you said just hit me. I can relate so much to that. And, I kept in touch with these young people and kind of coached and mentored them. That was an indication that our stories matter, all of us. But it still wasn't implanted in my brain. And so it took many other opportunities where I opened up and I was vulnerable, where people said, man, what you said really resonated with me. And finally, about 7 or 8 years ago, I realized maybe there's something here. Maybe I have the ability to connect with lots of people at one time. And that's when I started to explore, speaking. And it was just basically listening to what people were telling me. People were saying, you're an amazing speaker, you're impactful, you got me thinking. So I had to listen to what they were telling me. And then that's when I started really developing my speaking skills.
So what was your process then for going from the reluctant speaker to now, dude? Your stages are growing. So from where you started in along this avenue to where you are now, what's that process been like?
Well, there's this thing that I teach my coaching clients how to do. It's really to unlock all of your champion stories. So we do this exercise where you go back throughout your life and you look at milestones, key things that have happened that made you who you were at different points in your life, whether it's your preteen, teen, adulthood. And there's a system that I take people through to identify certain things, what happened, who was involved, and what were the lessons. So I started doing that for myself so that I could get clear about my journey, but also to develop stories. So I started with storytelling first. I started like developing my stories and sharing the stories before I put the whole framework around how to be a better speaker. And as I started getting better with storytelling, then I started taking courses, reading books. I would go out and learn something and then, maybe go to a youth center and deliver a speech and come back and analyze it. I would record myself, watch myself back. So I really dove into, learning from people like Les Brown and watching what Tony Robbins did. I watched comedians for their timing and their interaction. I watched pastors, and I really just kind of engrossed myself in how to be a better communicator. But I realized I'm not here to motivate you. I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm trying to spark you to take inspired action. And so I wasn't standing up there saying rah, 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 and you leave and then you're excited. And the next day you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? you feel worse than when you came there, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
we're like, yes. And then we're like, okay, he didn't give us any instructions. What am I? So I started working on that aspect. And it really just started leading me to bigger platforms, mainstream media, audiences 10,000, 20,000 people. And it just kind of opened up. But you have to find something that you're curious about, follow that curiosity, see where it takes you. And if it's not what you're meant to do, you do it all over again with something else.
Mhm.
And so that's what I continued to do until I got to this point.
We can never be afraid to just try, right? We can never be afraid. All right. So we've unpacked a lot. Uh, I know that you've just finished doing some traveling too, and I've really been curious about it because you've documented some of it on your socials. Because I'm really tapped in on your socials. Uh, but I'm just curious, man. What can you tell us about the experience that you've just had over the last 30 days or so?
Well, when I grew up, my mom was a single mom at times raising three kids. And I remember my mom getting encyclopedias. And I remember looking in these encyclopedias at these places all over the world. And I was like, one day I want to travel there. But I just never had that opportunity. Even when I got my corporate job, it was almost like I was still stuck at that kid living in low income housing. I didn't know I could travel. And so I remember, taking my first trip to, I think it was Jamaica. And that kind of opened things up for me because my mother is from Jamaica. So it was my mother's homeland. And when I started to travel, it started kind of opening up things like who I am and my place in the world. And so I started learning things about me. I've been to like 26 different countries, Brazil, Spain, Italy, all these places, Thailand. And every time I would travel, it would kind of peel back another layer in terms of who I am at my core and my place in the world,
Mhm.
or my conversations with people all over the world. And so over the last 3 years, man, I just been working, like, just helping people. And I said to my wife, I said, man, we both been working hard. We need to take some time and just get back to who we are, see family. So we decided that we were going to travel for 30 days and across Canada, which is, where I'm from. I went to the West Coast to see my family and friends and get tapped into nature.
Mhm.
Then I flew all the way back to the other end and did the same thing on the East Coast, which where I grew up, and tapped in with family and friends there, tapped into nature. And so for me, honestly, Justin, I didn't even realize how much I was doing, how close I was to burnout, uh, how far I had come over the last 3 years until I started traveling. And I was like, why am I just now enjoying this? This is why I was feeling low energy. This is the podcast, um, the online work. I've been doing work with men in prisons. I've been doing men with formerly incarcerated, working in low income communities, my coaching clients, speaking. I was doing all these things and I didn't even realize how much I was doing.
Mhm.
So what we need to do is we need to learn how to rest, how to relax, and how to reflect. And you don't have to travel to do those things. There were long stretches in my life where every single day I would do those things, but I just got away from it.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it helps you to do four things, which I say is really helps you tap into your inner champion. It helps you to find grace within yourself, to get clear about what you want, to get focused on the right things, and to be disciplined and have consistency. But you can't do that in the middle of chaos.
Right.
So every day when you take 10 minutes for yourself or 15 and you meditate or you read a book or you're listening to some music or you go for a walk or you exercise, that is your time for the 3 R's. And in that time, that's usually when you start to kind of get some clarity.
Mhm.
And so that's what it was for me. It was just a 30-day, enjoying friends and family, but to get reconnected with who I am and my purpose and get refocused. And that's what that trip did for me, man.
You sound renewed, and your energy level feels like it's probably higher than it was before, and that's saying a lot.
1,000%, brother.
Okay, so the person who is stuck right now, and I know we touched on this a little bit earlier in the conversation, but the person who is stuck in their life, they don't see a way forward. They don't feel like they have that champion inside of them to even begin to accumulate some forward momentum. They're in front of you right now. What do you say to them?
Well, there's two things. The first thing is we have to stop negative thoughts before they become a belief. So you have to do this thing that I call catch, release, replace. When you start to have these negative thoughts and these limiting things, I can't do this, I'm not good enough. You gotta first of all, you gotta stop it. You just stop. You're like, okay. Second thing is you want to understand where that's coming from, right? Why is that coming here? Okay, that's coming here because I made a mistake. You let it go and then you replace it with something powerful. Well, the truth is, I might not have the tools to figure that out right now, but I can,
Yeah.
or I will. So you catch the thought, you release it, you thank your brain for trying to protect you because your mind is trying to protect you when it comes up with these limiting thoughts. And then you replace it with something that's true, which is you might not know now, but you'll figure it out. So that's the first thing. We want to catch it, release it, and replace it before it becomes a belief.
Mhm.
But then now when we have these beliefs and we have these limiting thoughts that are ingrained in us, that's when we tap into that champion framework, the grace, the clarity, the focus, and the discipline. The first thing we have to do is to give ourselves some grace. Stop beating yourself up from mistakes in the past, from not being further ahead in your life or further ahead in your business or your career. You're doing the best that you can right now with the tools and the information and the resources that you have. And you got to learn to release the past, right? And understand that you're still here.
Yeah.
So that's where the grace comes in. Give yourself some grace, right? Stop being so hard on yourself. Once you do that, now you can start to kind of get clear about, well, what is it that I really want? Maybe I don't have what I want because I'm not even clear about what I want. I'm chasing other people's dreams. I see Justin with a podcast, so maybe I decide to start a podcast, but I never wanted one, right? So you got to get clear about what you want.
Right.
What do you want in all areas of your life that matter? Your finances, your career, your business, your family, your relationships, and you sit down, you make a list. This is what a healthy relationship looks like. This is how much money I need to make in order to live what Ramith Sethi says is my rich life. And you just write that stuff down. And then what happens is you're starting to program your mind for what you want and not what you don't want. Too many of us are focused on what we don't want, so our mind heads there.
Yeah.
When you start writing these things down, this is what I want, it's crazy how your subconscious mind goes to work for you.
Yep.
Right? You start going to events or places that you've never been before. You're like, why do I want to go to this networking event? You start exercise, you start doing all these things and you don't know why. It's because you planted the seed in your mind. This is what I want. And so the clarity piece is so important because we put our energy in a lot of different places and those things aren't moving our life forward. Once you get clear now you got to get focused. Now you make a plan, you connect with the right people, find mentors, coaches, books, YouTube videos. When people say to me, hey, Coach Stone, like, I just can't afford to take a course or a program. Maybe you can't, but maybe you should look at the other things that you're spending money on that maybe could go towards that. Maybe you can't. But the other thing is you have the internet. So when someone says to me, I can't find out how to set a goal, that's not true. You can Google, how do I set goals? So
That's right.
taking advantage of the resources that you have. But again, you have to change your mindset from I don't have the money or the time to this is what I want.
Yeah.
So that helps you to get focused, connected with the right people, the videos, the courses, the books. And then the last piece is discipline. You got to take consistent action every single day, even when you don't want to, right? You got to get up and program yourself that I'm going to take action on this goal every single day, whether I want to or not. And the biggest myth is that a habit is formed within 30 days. That's not true.
Mm-hmm.
There was a Stanford, I think it was a Stanford study that said it was 66 days.
Yeah.
So if you do something for 66 days, and if you fall off track, you play a little game with yourself where you try not to miss 2 days in a row.
Mm-hmm.
It's called don't break the chain. So you miss one day, that's okay. You got to get back on track the day after. If you do that for 66 days, all of a sudden you're on autopilot. And your life can look a lot different in 90 days if you take consistent action. If you said, I want to change my financial situation, my health, my relationship, what I want to travel to a certain place, if you work hard on that thing for 90 days, you'll surprise yourself. I've had people come to me and say, hey, coach, I've been working on this thing for 2 years. In 90 days of focused action, they knocked it out. So if you do those things, give yourself some grace, get clarity about what you really want, get focused on the right things and filter out the wrong things. And sometimes that's people. Mm-hmm. And then get disciplined and take action every day. It'll help you to kind of get unstuck and to move through that difficulty.
Amazing. Y'all, Pep Squad, y'all see why I said if you do not leave this episode just ready to do something. Man, all right. So you've dropped gems for this entire episode, and I can't thank you enough for blessing us and for honoring us by appearing on the podcast. I love to end my podcast in season 2. I didn't do this in season 1 because I didn't do guests, but for season 2, because I'm adding so many valuable voices to these conversations, I like to end these episodes by allowing you to give a pep talk to the listeners. Now, you've given like 30 bajillion over the course of this conversation already, but I'm going to mute my mic, and I want to give you 90 seconds, 2 minutes, just to encourage someone to inspired action the Coach Stone way. All right?
All right.
All right, here we go.
I just want to say to anybody out there who's feeling stuck, who's feeling left behind, who feels like life is passing you by and other people are passing you by, your time wasn't yesterday. Stop beating yourself up over the mistakes that you've made. You're on a different path, and your path might be different than other people. I want you to know that you have a champion inside of you. You have greatness within you. You have so much more potential, and you might not see it right now, but it's in you. And so what you might have to do is borrow somebody else's belief in you until you can believe in yourself. That's what I had to do when I didn't believe in myself and I was struggling and had low self-esteem. I had to borrow somebody else's belief in me until I could believe in myself. And so if you need to borrow someone's belief, you can borrow mine. You can borrow Justin's. I believe that you have greatness in you. I believe that you have so much more potential. I believe that the best is yet to come. And your time is not yesterday or tomorrow, it's right now. And when you understand it's right now, you start taking action towards making sure that it happens. So whether you're struggling financially in your relationship, emotionally, I want you to know that there's so much more out there for you. Don't quit. Keep going. Connect with people who are going in the same direction as you, and borrow somebody else's belief in you until you can believe in yourself. And look, I'm one of those people. I am for you. I know what it's like to be stuck. I know what it's like to have low self-esteem, to not be worthy. Now is your time. Keep fighting for what you want, and you will shock yourself.
Woo! Come on. Coach Stone is in the building. Coach, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. Would you tell everybody how they can keep in touch with you and how they can find you?
Yeah, man. Before I finish, I just want to say, Justin, thank you so much, man. When I first met you in Clubhouse, I had this connection with you because of your authenticity and how open and honest you are. And I know that, people are getting that from you listening to this podcast every week. So I just want to say thank you so much for the connection. Thank you for having me here on your podcast. And I look at your social media and see those pep talks every day. Keep going, man. You don't know how much they're inspiring people. Whether they say it or not, there's
Thank
people
you.
who are secretly watching you. So thank you so much, brother, for all that you do and for having me on the show. Anyone who wants to connect with me, it's the simplest thing. I am Danny Stone on every single platform. At I am Danny Stone on every platform. And you can go to championu.net if you want to find out about some courses, programs, and stuff like that.
Awesome. Thank you. And I humbly I receive your kind words, man. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And y'all, please tap into Coach Stone. Tap in. However you tap in, just tap into him. If you're looking to get into speaking, uh, he would be as good a coach as any to help you discover your story and develop that way to communicate it effectively and get it out there. Because he's right. Everybody has a story, and your story matters. It may not matter to every other person, but there is a segment, an audience out there for your story. And Coach Stone can help you refine that story and get it out there. The Grit and Gratitude podcast, he's bringing the man. Y'all have heard him. Y'all have heard him in this episode. So what he gave us today is what you will get everywhere that he is. He's bringing it to you. He's inspiring you to action. And we thank you, Coach Stone, so much for appearing on the Pep Talk podcast. And everybody, after this short break, we will be right back to wrap this episode up. This has been the Pep Talk podcast with your boy, Coach Jay, and special guest, Coach Danny Stone. We'll be right back. Did not tell you. Did not tell you. Coach Stone goes crazy. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. There is way too much that he said in this interview to unpack. But the only thing that I want to say as I wrap this episode up for you is what he said, the activity that he takes his clients through is to access your champion story. Look back over the course of your life, and I challenge you to do it this week. Look back over the course of your life and look for the times in your life where you exhibited the attributes of a champion. Maybe you helped someone. Maybe you were there for somebody who didn't have anybody else, but you were there for them. Maybe you didn't owe them anything. You just saw that they needed someone. Maybe you forgave someone who maybe you thought didn't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe you decided to prioritize being there for yourself and blocking out negative influences and toxic thoughts. Maybe you decided to hire a coach and get your mindset right. Maybe you're participating in the 30-day affirmation challenge that we're having in the Pep Talk Podcast Facebook group. It's still not too late to join. Find your champion story. And I dare you to play that joker on repeat 24/7, because what happens is we do something good, or we're involved in something good, and we forget about it almost immediately. But that negative, toxic stuff, it tends to stick to us and stay with us. And I'm challenging you, like I've been challenged before, to switch it up, to make the things that stick with you the things that are going to build you up. Like Coach Stone says, there is a champion inside of you. There is greatness inside of you, but it starts with belief. It starts with belief. You have to believe that the champion is there. You have to believe that that champion is waiting on the opportunity to show up and to show out. And maybe you went to a room and you're like Coach Stone said, Coach Stone is in the building. Maybe you walk up in a room and maybe you say it to yourself like Coach Jay is in the building. They may not know me now, but they're going to know me, right? Even with this podcast, y'all, let me tell you, this will be a ranking podcast. You know why? Because Coach Jay is in the building. And it's not just me showing up, it's y'all showing up for one another. You have to believe in yourself, before anybody else believes in you. Because even if that belief is coming from other people, oftentimes it does not stick unless the belief is coming from you. So it's time for you to embrace your greatness. It's time for you to embrace your inner champion. It's time for you to prioritize seeing yourself as the victor and not as the victim, as the champion and not as the defeated. And this is not a statement of arrogance, because you're not placing yourself above anybody else. That same champion is available in every person, but every person does not choose to access it. And Coach Stone challenged you, and I'm reiterating that challenge. I challenge you to see your champion, to intentionally see your champion, but don't just see it, begin to embrace it and live like it. Live like it's there. Now, if you want the rest of that, you're going to have to go back and listen to this episode again, because like I said, Coach Stone, he is a beast. He is an absolute beast. And I'm not going to try to reiterate it the way that Coach Stone said it, because I can't do it, because I'm just Coach J. But still, Coach J is in the building, because I'm showing up. And I dare you to show up this week and beyond as well. Y'all, this has been episode 9 of the Pep Talk podcast. Again, y'all, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the audio on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, iHeart, wherever you find us. Subscribe. And don't just subscribe, rate, review, share, comment, like. Reach out to us at thepeppodcast@gmail.com or on the socials @_JB I want to hear from you. I want you to become a part of this community, y'all. I want to change the world through the power of a good pep talk. You heard me? All right. So I will see you next week for episode 10 of season 2 of the Pep Talk podcast. And y'all, it blows my mind that this is the total of episodes that I've done of this podcast is 36. 36 episodes. We took a little break over the summer, but we've produced and put out, as of today, 36 episodes. And it blows my mind that we're at 36 episodes already. And I love this now more than I did in the beginning. And I believe in this now more than I did in the beginning. And I believe in you now more than I did in the beginning. You're a champion. We're a champion. So let's believe it and let's live like it. And as we always say before we close, keep it love, keep it light, and keep it peppy. This is the Pep Talk podcast. I'm your host, Coach Jay. And we'll see you next week. Y'all be blessed.